You got 1 more minute, 1 minute warning. All right. Welcome. Thank you. All right, everyone, go ahead and grab your seats. We are about to get started. Short and sweet break, but we are back for another great lineup. Thank you. Yes, come on in, everybody in the hallway. You don't want to miss it. All right. Well, those of you in the room aren't going to miss the goods. We have a fantastic lineup set up with some fantastic speakers, Erica Groshen, Dominique Duval-Diop, and Robert McGough, and we will be moderated by Rob Santos. So please welcome our next panel.
Good morning, folks. That was quite a session this last one, wasn't it? I'm hoping that we will continue the same energy because we have something really good planned for you today. This session is entitled Making Evidence Work, Infrastructure, Governance, and Tools that Turn Data into Public Value. And we have 3 wonderful speakers. I'll very briefly introduce them. At the end over here, we have Dr. Dominique Duval-Diop, who is the Acting Chief Data Officer in the Office of the Undersecretary of Economic Affairs at the Commerce Department. She's a policy leader, data scientist, and economic geographer, and was formerly the U.S. Chief Data Scientist at the Office of Science Technology Policy at the White House in the former administration. She also has had many leadership positions, including being Associate Director of the Millennium Corporation, or Millennium Challenge Corporation. Next is Robert McGough, who's Chief Data Officer of the state of Arkansas. So see, we have both a federal presence as well as a state presence. As Chief Data Officer, he leads statewide data and AI strategy for the state of Arkansas. He has over 25 years of public data management experience in this role and has had multiple governor office level positions, leadership positions, helping out with various activities and policies. And then finally we have Dr. Erica Groshen, who's the Senior Economic Advisor at Cornell University. She's also the 14th Commissioner of the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yes. And she spent much time at the Federal Reserve as the Vice President for Research and Statistics Group in New York and other places. And she is a recognized expert in employers' role in labor market outcomes. So we have a really good mix of individuals here. And we're gonna talk about practical approaches. How do you take limited resources, existing data platforms, working with states and agencies to bring data together, and then create something, some data products that actually help your state or help the U.S. citizens. And so what we're going to do is we're gonna ask the panelists to tell their story on how they managed some practical approaches, strengths, some limitations, challenges, obstacles, what worked, what didn't, etc. And we'll do them one at a time, each giving 5 to 7 minutes or so. And then after that, we will have a little bit of back and forth and then talk about 2 other things. One is the future and of where we go with this process. And second, of course, if there's time permitting, AI. And maybe a little bit of time for Q&A, okay? So let's begin with Robert. Let's get the state perspective.
All right, thanks. This is a big topic in a short time, so it was a good thought exercise to think it all, put all together and try to crunch it down. I'm gonna try to hit kind of 5 key things in 5 minutes. I can't go very deep into any of them, so I'm gonna surface out some of the key things that were very helpful to us. And then, feel free to flag me now. We're very happy to share and collaborate on any of them. So I think for us, it really came down to, with our story, vision, governance, infrastructure, evidence, and use, with a kind of an implied continuous improvement. So for vision, I think we were very fortunate in Arkansas to have a well-defined North Star, so we weren't trying to kind of boil the ocean. We had several kind of key pieces of legislation, including the one that defined our vision for our unified longitudinal data system. Really said that the purpose was for continuous real-time alignment of programs and services to the evolving needs of Arkansas. So that was pretty clear. Everyone could get it and get behind that. So we knew kind of what we were doing. But then to really make that a little bit more tangible to everyone else, we did a listening tour of all of our different department leadership and really kind of developed out a gap analysis of what are their key needs. That also let us, we put out a published study quantitatively say that it didn't start with analysis, it was sharing and then integration and then analysis, and that it was a hybrid set of operational and analytical uses. And then that's been continued to be updated from our governor's workforce cabinet, from various executive orders and legislation. Once we had that vision, before we started building infrastructure, we needed governance. I think that was the real enabler. And so one of the key things, which we actually learned from Texas, they had a Texas statewide data sharing agreement. Putting a statewide standardized data sharing agreement in place was instrumental. It took data sharing processes from months to days, and that's been big. And now working with the Data Integration Support Center in LA is here, we've been working to kind of further refine that, and hopefully in a way that's fairly standardized across states. So definitely check out what DISC is doing there. We have governance with everybody participating, all the executive branch agencies, legislative, judicial. So everyone kind of had a seat at the table to kind of work out what governance feels right and help us all collaboratively get from the culture of no to the culture of how can we find a way. And some of that was really just, I think the technology is always there. We move at the speed of culture, and everyone had to get literate about tiered access and that data sharing is not a binary all or nothing thing. That there is a way to do it safely to get that, shift that risk utility curve. And tiered access is, very much a part of why we're in the ADRF. As far as infrastructure, we obviously use the ADRF a whole lot. Very key. I think there'll be lots of other topics about that at the conference. But ours also sits on top of a state data hub that does the sort of real-time, individual level operational data sharing. And then it's a key part of it to be our secure research enclave, product development, collaborative governance. One key piece there, because there's just one. There's not one for education and one for commerce. Braided funding is key. Otherwise, the technology, the data silos follow the funding silos. There is a field guide on that. That if you want to know more about, ask Kathy Stack, because I think it's a hidden gem. And we've got a centralized function. We have the Arkansas Data Office. So we kind of synthesize across all of the different sort of agency needs, what they're looking at, because, holistically, it's a little bit of a different mission. So, and there's some gaps that might be there that aren't between the different agencies, but they're good for the state, they're good for the residents. As far as evidence, now we've got the governance. We put a lot of data into the ADRF as the environment. The applied data analytics training programs have been critical, but they've been very beneficial besides building our capacity in our community of practice. So the evaluating enrollment to employment, that was about 30 projects across like 26 states, 170 participants, 10 data collaboratives, state impact, STEM, multiple NSF grants. They're all building on a common data model where we don't have to start over from scratch every time. That is giving us a sort of flywheel effect where we're learning, we're generating metadata about our data, we're finding data quality issues, we can connect to the source, we're generating reusable artifacts, and of course evidence. It's good for Arkansas, but then I think hopefully like it's repeatable things that other states can use and benefit from, and we can all kind of get smarter together. I think Ray kind of talked about this a little bit too, but then it's use. You know, we can have all the evidence in the world, but like when we're talking about impact, it's written all over the place. That's use. So we get together these classes, we do these wonderful products, we learn a lot of stuff, but what really becomes value is use, and that's where we come to the products that translate to practice. And so I think Dr. Jake Walker will be talking tomorrow about the Arkansas Integrated Referral and Outcome System, which is the sort of operationalization of a lot of what we've done with the ADRF. So it's how an individual case manager can help, you know, an individual Arkansan using the administrative data. We also have really kind of, with our talent marketplace, we kind of look at it as that's how we use our longitudinal data to benefit each individual Arkansan. So that's kind of our cycle, and I think that's good enough, and we'll get into questions later if you want to know any other specific things.
Very good. Thank you very much. And next we'll go with Dominique.
Okay, I'm going to follow Robert's good example and use my stopwatch as well. I really, you know, my understanding of data governance and the importance of data really harkens back to my time when I was working in the state of Louisiana and Hurricane Katrina hit, and so I was working not only in the immediate response in the Emergency Operations Center, but also in housing recovery. And we were trying to stitch together different data sets to be able to inform how we developed our programs and you know, how we should respond and prioritize you know, tight resources. And so, you know, you had, you know, damage estimate data, you had information, different geographic layers that were used, you know, different, you know, boundaries and projections. You had application data, FEMA application data, housing road home application data, you know, you had land records, and all of this, all of these different types of data sets had their own rules, their own definitions, their own structures. And so what I learned is that because of that, we were unable to effectively, securely, and responsibly connect these data sets together to make quick, informed decisions, and because of that, people were waiting. And sometimes that waiting was a life or death situation, especially when you think about the elderly people who were really waiting to come back home. So that experience kind of shaped my understanding of data and the importance of data governance. And right now at the Department of Commerce, advancing data governance here, that is really kind of the experience I had was a microcosm of what we have at the Department of Commerce, because we have all of the data that I was dealing with. We have, you know, environmental data, geospatial data. We have data on demographics, on economics, on businesses, on people, and trying to figure out how to connect those data sets to inform decisions continues to be a challenge. And one of the reasons is because our department is highly federated. Each bureau has its own missions, its own systems, its own governance structures, its own metadata practices, et cetera. And they have their own unique mission needs. So they develop these differing approaches because of those unique missions. They also have unique workforce realities. And this decentralized environment is really siloed and inconsistent, and so it makes cross-bureau coordination difficult. So Robert talked a little bit, you know, a lot about the technicalities. I was really jealous listening to you because, you know, you have, you know, a statewide data sharing agreement. That's amazing. There's no way that we've been able to do do that within our department or across the federal government. It's extremely difficult, and we're able to do it one-off. But what we can do, or what I've been trying to do, is just recognize that federated reality and not try to erase it, but elevate it, organize it, and build off of it. And so as a CDO, I view my role not to impose a one-size-fits-all solution to the department. Instead, my role is to bring people together, to surface and uplift those excellent successes and examples that are working within bureaus, share that information across bureaus, and help build shared solutions to those common challenges that each of our bureaus face. And also kind of build the capability together from the ground up, not imposing it from the top down. And this is really important because, the people that are the closest to the mission, the closest to the data, they're the ones that understand, not me kind of sitting in the stratosphere up here. My role is influenced by a lot of different statutes. One of those statutes is the Evidence Act of 2018, which actually established the role of the Federal Chief Data Officer. We also leverage that, as well as all of the OMB guidance that has come out to support implementation of that. And one of the things that was established as well was the Federal Chief Data Officer Council. So we share not only within our department, but across the federal government, our experiences as well. So it's kind of layers of this work. And one tool that we use is our data governance board. So our data governance board brings together the data leaders, the data experts from each bureau, and we meet on a monthly basis and we hash out our challenges. And we establish working groups to also develop ways to kind of further share that knowledge and come up with common policies and solutions. So this is alignment across this federated environment without, kind of trying to make things too uniform. And, so so what does this mean in reality? So this means establishing, enterprise data standards, for example, or it means, requiring richer metadata and context to be associated with our data. It means sharing requirements for data catalogs, and it also means really learning together about what it means to put together effective APIs to increase access to our data, and how to structure that and ensure that it has rich context as well. And and all of this, doing all of this while still allowing the bureaus to maintain the systems that best enable them to meet their missions and their needs. I think I'll stop right there because I'm over time. Wow.
Okay. Thank you. Erica?
Okay. I think I'm going to put my timer on because I am, that's 44 minutes. No, not 44.
Put your stopwatch on.
7. Yeah, okay, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to start off by talking about when I first became commissioner of BLS, it was drinking from the fire hose, right? BLS does so many different things. Washington is different than New York. The Federal Reserve, the BLS is different from the Federal Reserve System. It's drinking from the fire hose. And one of the first things that people brought to my desk was the issue of factoryless goods producers. Are the establishments that design products and market them but never make them because they contract all that out, are they manufacturing or are they something else? Are they management establishments? What are they? And the BLS and Census Bureau tended to classify them differently. And there were other examples of how the business register maintained by the Census Bureau and that maintained by the BLS were different. So a current example of that is from 2021. The Census Bureau says there are 781 semiconductor business establishments in the U.S., and the BLS says there's 1,912. All right, so more than double, BLS says, the number of employees. And the trends are different. Census says from 2018 to 2021, there was a loss of 21 establishments, and And BLS said there was an increase of 143. Employment trends different. Census Bureau says said there was a decline. BLS says there was an increase. Right? So this is difficult to deal with, right? And let me start off by saying I did not solve that problem, right? It's still there. And the top line, number of establishments in the whole economy, top employment, more or less consistent between the two, but you look underneath the hood by industry in particular, and they can diverge substantially in numbers and in trends, and it's especially true for emerging industries where these things are not very well established. The technology sector. So who cares? Oh, local economic policymakers care about these things, what's growing, what's not. Workforce development community cares about these things. The BEA, which has to combine information from the BLS and the Census Bureau for all the national income and product accounts, has to deal with these discrepancies. So why is this in place? Well, we have these different business registers. They assign the industries differently. The BLS works mostly from the QCEW and the annual refiling survey information, and the Census Bureau uses some of that information, gets some information from the IRS, and they have some different priorities. Are they more focused on products or processes or employees, things like that. So there are reasons. It's not ridiculous, but it's a real challenge. And so it comes down to differences in sources, differences in priorities. So no single boss is telling them, figure it out, guys. And when I had that meeting in my first 3 months at BLS and we sat around the table, I didn't know what to do about this. And I didn't solve it, right? It's still not solved because there's also one other problem, which is, of course, the data access problem. BLS doesn't have access to IRS data. Census Bureau does, so they can't, they're legally restricted from sharing it anyway. But if that were gone, you'd still need the boss telling them to reconcile them. And you'd still need MOUs between the two agencies, and that would and 3 agencies, because IRS would be there. So then you'd still need 6 sets of lawyers to agree to this, annually or maybe every 2 or 3 years, right? So I'm going to say we're going to talk much more about this. But these things are true about the federal statistical system, and in that I'm including the states because the states are part of the federal statistical system. First thing is that the data produced by this system is the best that's available. It is not a contradiction to say, though, that the data could and should be much better. And it's not a contradiction to say that we know more or less how to do this. We know that we need more resources. We know that we need more coordination. And we need more advocacy. Advocacy in the form of better communication, reaching out to our elected officials, and doing all of the work that we need to improve trust. And that's really our mission going forward. And let me see how my time, oh, hey, I have another minute yet. Okay, on the coordination side, there are lots of mechanisms for it, and I think that one of the most important ones is getting agreement on data and technology standards so that we are all starting out with common concepts and common information about the data, that we move as far as possible away from surveys, which we will always need, but the future is in growing the other kinds of data and making that interoperable.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. It's interesting that we saw here 3 examples of what's going on in the real world. There's actually some progress being made at the state levels, bringing state level data together. at the federal level, Dominique talked about how they're making progress and getting, at least within commerce, agencies to talk to each other and think about standards. And Erica brings us back to earth, saying, hey, look where we are right now. There are still fundamental problems with the federal statistical system, how you define data elements. And it's in that context that I had some questions for each of you. I guess I'll start with Robert. Bringing together state data is one thing, but was there ever any attempt to fold in and to match federal data as well? And what progress or roadblocks did you come across in that?
I think that attempt's now, and I think most states are thinking about the same things right now, because we've got needs right now around community engagement requirements, around workforce Pell, around payment area, all these things that are difficult to answer with just state data or one state's data. So I think that next piece is, from intra-state data sharing and integration use to multi-state data sharing and integration use, which was where we're hearing what we can uniquely solve together, as well as to some extent some cross-sectoral. I know from the state federal side, there are federal data sets in the ADRF. I know the ones that we're looking at using is for homelessness data, because of the way that comes up is a little bit different than the state level. And we're really excited about the work with the IRS Secure Query Service.
So do you see sort of getting the intrastate work together, interstate work together, like having collaborations as sort of an intermediary between federal, getting full access to federal data versus just having your own state data?
Well, I think there are different needs, and states sometimes have very operational needs that have a higher need for granularity and timeliness and things like that with some of the things we're facing.
And you still run into, even with interstate, you run into data standardization issues and such, I imagine?
Yes. Now, we've tried to kind of leverage federal reporting standards, because we're like, hey, everyone can produce a promise, a pearl, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we can, so we have a common shape to try to make it plug and play. But I think we can produce them faster, because maybe we have needs that need the same data, but we need them with less latency, or sometimes with additional data.
So, Dominique, I was really struck by your invoking things like the Evidence Act and other, there's like Title 13, Title 26, et cetera, for privacy and data security. The Evidence Act was 2018, and it was a bipartisan. It was under the first Trump administration. They signed that. And yet here we are 8 years later, and some of the basic tools like a national NSDS, National Statistical Data Center, have not yet been established. It's still under the pilot. What do you see as the obstacles to being able to move more quickly to adopt the full intent of that act?
Yeah, I see, and anything I say is my own opinion. No, I see that the change in, kind of the prioritization of, as you have each administration changing, I think has, slowed things down somewhat, but I actually see a lot of continued progress. I mean, people who are still working within the federal government are making those steps. They may be more incremental than we would hope, but I think that there's still a lot of progress, and I'm kind of channeling my ever optimistic, self here. But when you talk about data standards, I just thought about going from DCAT 1.1 to DCAT 3.0. I mean, that's very wonky and technical, but it just hit me right now that if we're able to do that and adhere to that standard across all of our federal data, that would be helpful for states. And we're working towards that. We're moving towards that. We're actually, working on a tiger team within the federal CDO council to fix that standard and that schema so that we can, actually implement it at the federal level, which would then have, I think, positive ripple effects for anyone that uses our data, whether that be states and local government or researchers or just civil society. But I do think that investing resources. So the National Secure Data Service got an investment, from the CHIPS Act, and they're able to really, yes, it is in pilot phase, but that pilot phase is really helping us to learn what works and test things out. And we actually have a project that we're working on, that to implement an AI benchmark, to figure out how we can improve the way LLMs interact with federal statistical data. So I think that, yes, it could be faster. Yes, it should be faster, but we're still moving it further,
Okay.
making progress.
I will add, and I don't want you to respond to this because that could get you in trouble, that during my time as director of the Census Bureau, word on the street was that it was relatively easy to pass the Evidence Act, but then Congress never funded the implementation. And so people had to do it, or agencies had to try to do it on the fringe with a few nickels here and a few nickels there. And I think that that's a real challenge. Resources are a huge challenge. Erica, you have the ability to speak in a way that maybe some of the other folks here don't. So I'm going to ask you an interesting question to me. The current, FY26 budget calls, if I recall correctly, for the integration of the Census Bureau, BEA, and BLS. Do you see that as a potential catalyst for coming to terms with some of the issues that you brought up with regard to different data definitions and such?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. This is not the first time that's been proposed. I think the first time it was proposed was 1903. Okay. And it hasn't, I'll just note that it hasn't ever happened. But the last 3 or 4 presidents, I think, have all proposed that as well. So I'm working with a group that the American Statistical Association has been sponsoring to think about what the structure of the federal statistical system should look like going forward. And our group does believe that it needs to be much more integrated. And so the real question is, do we do it virtually or do we do it administratively? And it's very easy to jump to the idea that it should be done administratively, because at least that puts the big stamp on it. Yes, we're trying to do that. On the other hand, actually executing that and getting all the parties to agree to that is very difficult. And it's not clear that how well that will go. There are certainly examples of such kinds of consolidations in the past that have not worked out for a very long time. So people talk about the Department of Homeland Security. And people also talk about making the statistical system a target. They say that's the putting all your eggs in one casket approach, right?
Like Stats Canada?
However, if we were designing this from scratch, I think we would design something much more like the Federal Reserve System, where it was separate from the normal operations of government, but with responsibilities that insulated it from pressure and prioritized professional competence and accountability in that sense rather than political sense.
Yeah,
and also put the chief statistician in charge of the statistical agencies rather than being in charge in OMB in charge of 8 people who are trying to coordinate the entire system. Right. Most of you don't know who the chief statistician is. In fact, I've forgotten his name. It was just the recent one just left, and there's a new one. So, who has 3 other jobs in this administration? Okay, so what do I think is the future? I think the future has to be much more coordination. Whether we do it virtually or by reorganization, I don't know. Do I think that bringing BLS, BEA, and the Census Bureau together and keeping them in commerce is a good idea? I don't think keeping them in commerce is a good idea, because I think it should not be under a cabinet secretary. And I also think that does not solve the problem with all the other agencies that we care about, education and health and transportation, et cetera. So you don't get any benefits if you only do that. It solves the problem if all you care about are the national macroeconomic variables. And I, as a microeconomist, don't think that's enough, but and most of you probably don't either. So it has to be more comprehensive. We will actually, our group will be coming out with a proposal, I hope by the end of the month. It's in draft form, because it focuses much more on how you would do this virtually than on just putting them all together separately. It has 30 proposals that go into this. But that tells you how important it is and how challenging it is to get all of this coordination and to get rid of the bureaucratic barriers that are in place right now to data sharing and prioritization, et cetera. So short answer is, would I support BLS and Census Bureau and BEA being combined? If it were a step towards this larger movement of making our federal statistical system more consolidated, yes. As an end in itself, I think it has dangers and it's inadequate.
Very good, thank you. Since we're on the topic of future, any comments from Dominique or Robert on where we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about the previous panel and how we were mentioning, how difficult it is to collect statistics now. Their non-response is really high. And it was put forward that, we need to think creatively about how we can use our existing data sets, collected through administrative processes, or just other processes. And, leveraging AI, obviously, is a way that we can do that. But, I started to think about, well, what about consent, and who owns those different data? Who owns the payroll data? Just because, Treasury collects it or has it, or some business has that information, doesn't mean that they own it. Did people give consent to let that data be used for other statistical purposes? That's something that I'm thinking about, because we have, AI is here. It's being leveraged in so many different ways. The landscape is changing so rapidly, and businesses and governments are trying to find solutions leveraging that technology, and I don't think we're always thinking about, should we do something? On our side at the Department of Commerce, we're working to make our data AI ready so that when people interact with our data using chatbots, they can access the authoritative public open information, and not hallucinate. So we're thinking about it from that perspective, but there's so many other ways that AI can be leveraged on data that we just really need to think about. Think really hard about how do we ensure that it does that in an unbiased fashion, in a secure fashion, et cetera.
Robert?
I think one stakeholder we haven't talked about will be increasingly important in the future is the resident to whom those administrative data pertain. So there's a lot of momentum around talent marketplaces right now. A big part of that is sort of, digital credentials or employment records, and we really see that as taking data about a person and really translating it into value for that person with data mobility and things like that. And I think with AI, trust is going to be more important, and that's going to be a key thing to having trust, along with linked open data and credentials and things that give us extra context and trust around what those data mean.
Okay. Since we morphed into AI, any final thought before we end on AI?
Yeah, I think that AI has, certainly all of these elements that we've talked about giving us an opportunity to improve the quality of statistics although it can't come at the cost of trust and transparency, and so that's going to require a lot of work going forward. It will be a huge help in creating the kind of blended data products that are the future of the statistical system. So I think that's really good. What I don't think, the other part of AI is, of course, tracking its impact, right? And right now, almost all of the studies of the potential impact of AI is looking at this idea of what are the exposed occupations. And that's basically just looking where the light is, but we know that the impacts of AI will be much broader than that. Indirect impacts and general equilibrium impacts. And for those, we need a much better system for tracking the workforce than we have now, because the ultimate impacts are going to spread much beyond these exposed occupations. And we know that we don't even know for sure which the exposed occupations are. So for that, we need a much better workforce development system, and that goes back to data standards for employer records on workers. So enhanced wage records that are more consistent, that are interoperable. So something like the JetX project is working on, like the BLS wage records project, the LEHD, these are all components of it, and all the work that all of the states are doing. This is the future, and it's that kind of effort that's going to be needed for wage records, but also for all kinds of transactions, health and medical records, and all of the state administrative data. If we go back to the Bible, when civilizations came together, smaller civilizations, larger ones, it's a lot about exchanging things amongst the people in them, so you have division of labor. Well, in the information age, what we are exchanging is information too. And just like we needed weights and measures to exchange goods, now we're going to need data standards so that we can safely and efficiently exchange information. And that's what's going to address the privacy problems, and that's what's going to give us the interoperability that we need going forward so that we can evaluate policies and programs, so that we can design targeting, so that we can understand economic conditions going forward. So that's the future that I see, and a lot of what we're talking about kind of comes together with this idea that standards and for data and for technology are at the root of this, with the governance systems for them.
Well, thank you, Erica. That was a great way to end this session. So on behalf of the board of Coleridge, of which I'm a member, full disclosure, we thank you, and audience, let's thank our panelists.
Well, thank you again, panel, for those insights and for sharing your thoughts on these practical solutions. Up next is lunch, and we'll be having some lightning talks during that session. But before I let you go, you have to stay a little bit longer. I do want to give you a quick reminder before the break to please take a moment to fill out the poll that's in the app. So if you have questions that are just keeping you up at night and you are just burning to ask them, put it in the poll, or other topics that you really want to make sure this week you talk about with your colleagues, put it in the poll. We do close that poll tonight, so that then tomorrow, just a little heads up, you get to vote on what's going to be talked about. So please make sure, again, put your insights into that poll. It'll close tonight, and then tomorrow we'll be voting. So for that Thursday afternoon session, it'll be that participant-driven discussion, and that means we want to hear your voice, and you get to tell us what we're going to talk about. So with that, I will let you get to lunch. We'll start with lightning talks, which is a quick little snippet of information, a little teaser for what's to come ahead, about 30 minutes. So grab your food, chat, and then find your seats, and we'll do that in about 30 minutes.